You finding it harder and harder to stay lean as the mileage adds up? Hi, I'm Nathan, and I've helped military, law enforcement, and first responder senior leaders just like you get lean, strong, and healthy so they can stay competitive, even with the youngest guys on the team. Today, we're talking about why fat loss in these career fields after 35 just seems to fizzle out and what you can actually do about it. You've been there, you're starting to get more office time, less work with the boys, pounds start catching up, joints start aching, and you pull muscle just sneezing. Now, if you're still eating like a 6-year-old, the solution is obvious. But if you've already cleaned things up, training consistently, dialing back the junk food, getting more intentional, and the fat still isn't coming off, or it's still there, that's what we're going to talk about today. As our career fields have very specific things that cause different problem sets than the average population. That requires more nuance when we start talking about how to lose fat. Now, you could go full caveman and eat nothing but elk meat for 3 months, which sounds pretty exciting, but that may not be quite the most logistically easy answer. All right. First thing, we're going to get into some problem areas. These are some storage patterns that we see within fat storage. So if you see some of these things, you can get a clue on what your issues might be. So if you have belly fat, that's generally stress, sugar, alcohol, and occasionally poor sleep. Love handles on the sides, insulin resistance, and carb sensitivity. The chest and underarms, you definitely probably are looking at some estrogen issues or a low testosterone, probably a combination of increased estrogen and low testosterone. Upper back or neck is typically long-term stress, sleep deprivation. And I have talked to a couple of providers that do say that when they see the kind of that upper back, lower neck area get really fatty, a lot of times it tends to be related to thyroid. Face and thighs. Typically, it's fluid retention, tends to be alcohol, but with the thighs, that tends to be mostly a women thing. So you're not going to see that as much with you guys. All right, so these are just indicators and warnings. They're not hard set rules. They're just something that could show you where you may have some issues just based on where your fat is storing at. Now, if you think about some of the things that we are exposed to in the career field, like chemicals, poor sleep patterns, field nutrition, you can see how our fat loss can be a little bit more complex, not completely, but there is some things that we want to look at, especially when you start getting into TBI, which then affects the hormones, which then affects everything else. So that is why we use a more holistic, integrated, deep health approach. All right. So we're going to talk about the 3 pillars of fat loss. This is just a framework, something that we found long-term success with. As a side note, I generally don't recommend doing long-term fat loss. Find it's better to do bursts of 3 to 8 weeks in general than a maintenance or a different goal for a couple months. You might be able to stretch that out to 12 weeks if it's a little bit lighter of a lean out, once or twice per year. Just keep an eye on your energy and your strength levels. All right, so our 3 pillars of fat loss are nutrition, training, and deep health. So we're going to start diving into some of those. Nutrition is obviously what fuels your physical and cognitive performance as well as recovery. Training is what's going to burn the fat without bleeding into strength or speed or affecting your job. And deep health systems are the practices that make the whole process sustainable. Today we're starting with pillar 1 because nutrition sets the foundation for everything else. Most guys I've worked with, if they get the nutrition, they will legit double the results in the first few weeks just by getting the nutrition squared away. So it's that important. All right, so nutrition. All right, so this is a fine line between reducing the calories enough to lose fat without affecting your strength, without affecting your job performance, and without affecting your strength and cognitive performance. So 10 to 15% deficit is kind of what we're looking for calories. You can measure this a variety of ways. The big issue you want to look for here is you can use the precision nutrition like hand method, where you're keeping track of how many palms and fistfuls and thumbs, etc., of your macronutrients. So what we're looking for is sustainable progress with these calorie deficits. So again, 10 to 15% is something that is sustainable. Anything more than that, you're going to start crashing with your energy. You might be able to do it short term, but it's not going to have that long term effect we're looking for. There is an entire rabbit hole of how calories in and calories out isn't as obvious as it would appear. We can go all the way down the rabbit hole of, are you consciously aware of what's going in and out? And there's ways to measure that, etc. Anyways, that's a whole nother article, whole nother video. We'll get into that later. All right, so why does it work to keep your calorie deficit around 10 to 15%? Keeps the metabolic engine running hot, preserves your muscle mass, prevents rebound hunger, cravings, and over reliance on stimulants like caffeine. Keeps your hormones like testosterone from being neglected. Specifically, if you don't get enough fat or cholesterol, your testosterone is probably going to get in the dumps. Try it out for 2 weeks. Reassess based on your energy, sleep, and training performance. If you feel like you're a sloth, you probably went a little bit too far into the deficit. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is caffeine timing. I know this is not going to be a popular subject, but it is something to look at. So we're not saying stop coffee or anything like that. What we're saying is try to reduce your intake after lunch. If you can cut it off by 11, that's ideal. This will help with your sleep, makes recovery a little bit easier, and your fat loss will be better. So your afternoon Celsius might not be necessary, but it could be hampering tonight's sleep and tomorrow's performance. So initial step is you can start with taking your average daily caffeine consumption and getting it all in by 11 o'clock. So whatever you normally consume, try and push that to before lunch if possible. See if things improve. Assuming that you can handle that much caffeine in that short period and don't turn into the Tasmanian devil. All right. So again, like we're talking about, that brings up better sleep, which equals better fat burning overnight. Your nervous system isn't as wired up. Again, assuming that the pre 11 o'clock isn't too much. Once you've adjusted, you should not see as many afternoon crashes or junk food cravings. You're also going to have improved recovery, like we said, that will lead to higher training output, which in turn will equal more fat loss. If you start to feel that afternoon crash, get a protein shake, maybe some electrolytes. You can do some light movement. I like to do walking in sunshine, which will help a lot of other things, or you can do like some air squats or something like that. Try and save the stimulants for your workout if you do in the morning, which is probably preferred. And we'll get into that part 2 of this series. All right, next one. Manage your protein. Doesn't really matter when you eat it, how you spread it out. If you want to eat 1 meal a day, 6 meals a day, 8 meals a day, it doesn't really matter. You just need to hit zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight consistently. And that is the key, is consistency. So track it over 3 to 5 days and see where you're actually at. The vast majority of guys I find are short. They think they're eating a lot. They're looking at the guy who's doing the chicken and broccoli and bringing that to work, and even they're probably not hitting some of their metrics unless they're tossing back a lot of the stinky protein shakes, which aren't bad. You just have to make sure you get the good ones. So looking at that, you can use an app. Any app that tracks macros is going to be perfectly fine. You can track it using the Precision Nutrition Palm method. Generally, for males, we're looking between 6 to 8 palms of protein a day. So that's 6 to 8 chunks of meat, unless you're some kind of plant-based, in which case then you're going to have to come up with other protein sources. Eyeballing it's probably not going to work. Like I said, most are not coming up with it, and they're coming up a little bit short. So why is this important? Because protein is hard to digest for the body and process. It actually burns more calories by digesting it than fat and carbs. Fat and carbs tend to get processed fairly quickly, and they don't take a lot of work in the digestive system. It'll preserve your muscle, so fat gets preferentially selected for elimination, provides raw materials for neurotransmitters like dopamine and GABA, regulates your appetite and energy levels also. That's why I like it as an afternoon. If I feel that drowsiness, I actually prefer protein over just about anything else. Okay, last one, strategic intermittent fasting. This isn't something you should do during high stress. You should do it on a low stress day. Sunday generally works well. It's not really a cleanse, but it can help your digestive tract. So once a week, we're looking, like I said, on Sunday's probably your best day. Just delay your first meal until sometime around lunchtime. Noon, 1 o'clock generally works pretty well from the night before, especially if you ate around 6. If you're eating a little bit later, you may have to push it a little bit further back. Start with protein when you do eat. You can eat some other stuff, but I think, again, if we're making that protein focus, start there and go from there. Basically, this is going to give your digestive system a little bit of a chill. So it gives it a R&R, if you will. It's going to improve the way your body handles food. It's going to recalibrate your hunger and fullness signals, which is ghrelin. Simplifies calorie control without complex tracking, and it optimizes energy for recovery versus storage. All right, so sum everything up. You're not necessarily doing anything wrong if you're not as lean as you used to be. Just your body's working with the career and stuff that we tend to deal with. Make sure you're getting your protein, limit your caffeine after lunch, trim off some calories in easy places like liquid calories, which tends to be a large source of kind of calories that don't really do much for you. Fat loss up to 35 doesn't necessarily mean starting over. It just means you have to make more strategic adjustments to match the mileage that you've got. You're not broken. It just takes a little bit more nuance of work to deal with the life inputs than when you were 22. It could eat anything. All right, coming up in part two, we will get into the training part of the three pillars. I will see you then.